I think vintage craft kits have become my newest hyperfixation, which wasn't necessarily on my bingo card for this year. But after finishing this tiny Bachmann Birds of the World parakeet kit, which I will show you more later, and bonus if you can find it while you're watching right now, and after picking up this vintage embroidery kit that I got a year ago, I've become completely fascinated by these old creative objects that when I found them hadn't even been opened. And I'm loving this strange little feeling of bringing them back to life. Hi, my name is Taylor, and today I want to talk about vintage craft kits, low stakes creativity, and why these weird little kitsch objects have been living rent-free in my mind lately. So this whole thing started really when I found this crewel embroidery craft kit a year ago on Etsy. Now, when I say crewel, I am saying crewel, not cruel. It's crewel embroidery. It's a type of embroidery that uses a really heavy yarn as opposed to an embroidery floss. It's a charming little quaint Swiss village, and I believe that it dates back to the late 60s and 70s. You can see here that it came in this big rectangular box, but I no longer have it in that box because I have taken things out and have started the project, and I absolutely love it. It is very kitschy. It is absolutely not fitting with any general aesthetic in my home, but at the same time, for that very reason, it fits beautifully. I would like to think that my home is rather eclectic and anything really can fit anywhere and just seems to be appropriate in that space. And so I'm hoping that the same can be true for this. And then more recently, I discovered this Bachmann Birds of the World parakeet 3D life-size model kit at an antique store in my hometown of Las Vegas. And it was just wedged between completely unrelated objects, tea towels, silverware bundles, just stuff. But the second I saw it, I wanted it. The kit was complete. It was approachable. It was slightly kitschy, but it was doable. And I think that last part matters more than I originally realized, because somewhere in the middle of painting this weird tiny bird, I started realizing, just like the embroidery tapestry, it wasn't really about the bird or the tapestry itself at all. It was about the experience that the bird and the tapestry was designed to create. The more I sat with these kits, the more I started realizing they feel emotionally different from a lot of modern hobbies. And I think part of that is because they were designed around pleasant participation, not mastery, not achievement, not visibility or optimization or content. Just here are your materials, take your time, make the bird. And honestly, I think adults are kind of starving for experiences like that right now, especially low stakes ones, because so much of modern hobby culture can accidentally start feeling high stakes. You need to improve, you need to optimize, you need to level up, you need to monetize it, you need to create an entire personal identity around any type of small hobby that you happen to pick up in an antique mall somewhere. And the little bird just doesn't care about any of that. The bird does not care if you improve or impress people or even become an expert bird painter. The bird just wants you to have a nice evening. And weirdly enough, I think that's why this feels so meaningful. And just for your information, this kit included, and I don't think you can see it here, but you can see it on the instructions, and I'll pop a little photo up so you can see, but it includes a perch, which is still back here, mounted on this right here. And you paint the perch, and that's where the bird lives. But this is my Bachmann Bird of the World, and she will be perched behind me over there on that little cubbyhole unit. One thing I keep thinking about is that these kits are actually very well designed, psychologically speaking, little craft kits for the everyday person, not necessarily for the elite hobbyist. It's for the everyday person who benefits not necessarily from the bird as a product, as a tangible item, but from the experience. Because look at the structure of these kits. They're tactile, they're finite, they're approachable and forgiving, charming in a slightly imperfect way, which is my favorite kind of charming. Just enough challenge to keep you engaged, not enough challenge to make you stressed. And that harkens back to the discussion we had on flow state in a previous video. In the video clips that you're seeing here of me working on this bird, that was very much a flow state of mind for me. It was quiet and calm. I had calm music on, and I was just making and painting the bird. And I actually worked on the bird in some part at my kitchen table with a good friend who happened to be painting a cardinal along with me. And I just think back on my Bachman bird experience with such pleasant feelings. It was a good time. It was a really good time. It's a great vibe. And I'm getting the same vibe and having the same time with my tapestry as well. And I think, like I mentioned before, it's just something that grown people are deprived of at this point. And you can see where our heads go as soon as we start a new hobby like this. We think, okay, well, now we have gotten into sketching, so we're going to begin drawing, and we're going to go down the rabbit hole of starting an entire illustration or drawing Instagram account. I'm speaking from experience here, but it's true. And we immediately think that we have to optimize those things and monetize those things and make those things a part of some kind of identity, as if we now no longer are what we were before we started that hobby, because now we are what this hobby represents. And that, in my opinion, is unfortunate logic, because it pins you to something that is just there to provide you with an atmosphere and an experience and some wind down time, and not necessarily something that needs to clench and hold you in one place and ultimately define you. Just a hobby for the sake of the enjoyment. Don't attach anything to it. Because when these kits came out, there was no real way to share the work that you're doing or to document the work that you're doing and then share it in any kind of a mass way, because you just did it and then you could share the finished product. But you didn't have anybody there besides the people living in your home with you to really share the process with. They didn't have that expectation. They didn't go to the store to pick up a kit to say, oh, I can't wait to start this, to share it on social media. And what's really interesting about me saying this is that I do share these things on social media, and I do use these things to share here in my creation of content. And so I feel kind of like a hypocrite in saying this. But the reason I share them with you is not because now I am, like I said, an elite model painter, or now I sketch, or now I watercolor, or now I am an embroidery artist. I share them with you because I want to share the love of just being a hobbyist, of a person who knows and values the experience that comes from sitting down with a hobby and sitting down with something, especially something that can have, a finite, like an end point. And kits are great for that. And of course, a tapestry like this is going to take some time. The end might not necessarily be in sight, but in the case of the Bachman bird, this is something that you can see being finished with in a couple of nights. And that's incredibly invigorating. A sketch can take a matter of moments. A painting can be something that you do in a day or several days. But just hobbying and being a Jack, Jane, or Jonas of all trades, there's something to that. There really is. And I think that that's what I love about sharing all of these things and all of these hobbies with everybody. Low stakes play, approachable creativity, finite tactile experiences, permission to enjoy something imperfectly. And I think part of what emotionally hooks me about these kits is the kind of life they imply. You can almost picture the person sitting down to work on this thing. Maybe after dinner, maybe after the kids go to bed, maybe early in the morning with coffee before work, just quietly sitting at the kitchen table under a pendant light, painting a little bird, simply because it felt pleasant to do. Also, I think what's really cool about resurrecting kits like this, and why it feels maybe particularly meaningful, is because you're not just making an object. Like when I find something like this at an antique store, I don't think to myself like, oh, I absolutely need a life-size parakeet hanging somewhere in my home. I don't think that's what is in the forefront of people's minds. Maybe when this came out, aesthetically, this was definitely something you would hang in your home as decor. But even so, even then, I can't imagine that people were purchasing these kits to add to the decor of their home. I think first and foremost, they purchased it for the experience. And so when you pick up a vintage kit, something like this, especially if you can find one that hasn't been started yet, but maybe even in particular, if you can find one that has been started and you complete it, you're continuing an experience someone designed and somebody had intentions of experiencing decades ago. Somebody designed these paint colors, which are completely unusable now, but these paint colors were designed by somebody. These instructions, the molded bird pieces with all of the little feathers embossed on the plastic. Somebody carefully structured this experience, hoping that somebody would enjoy participating in it someday. And decades later, somebody still is. And that's me. And hopefully, maybe this video inspires it to be you too. Because it feels less like nostalgia, because these come from a time before my time, before my existence. So it's not necessarily nostalgic. It's just this feeling of continuity. Like these objects still carry the shape of the evening and the experience they were designed to create. And that's really refreshing to me, because they're small, relatively speaking. They're finite, they're approachable. And like I said at the top of the episode, they're doable because they're for the everyday hobbyist. And that makes them sincere. I think we forget sometimes how important experiences like that actually are. So I plan on continuing working on these. In fact, I have purchased a couple more of these Bachman bird kits, but I had to find them. I had to scour the interwebs, places like eBay and Etsy. And over on the after show for today's episode, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to do a little window shopping. I don't plan on buying anything in this episode, but we are going to do a little window shopping and see what we can dig up in terms of vintage craft kits. Not necessarily Bachman birds and not necessarily embroidery, but maybe neither of those things, maybe both of those things. Who's to say? But I really encourage you, if you've never picked up a vintage or craft kit that you've discovered or unearthed at an antique mall or a thrift store, but you can find one that is complete, there are going to be parts of it that you probably can't use and you might have to substitute out with things that are new and fresh. But it's an experience. There's something magical about it, and I encourage you to give it a shot. So take a stab at it and let me know your experience. Email me, because I would love to do a follow-up on this. I would really love to do that. In the meantime, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me and listening to me ramble about this. I can't wait to see you in the after show, because it's going to be fun doing some window shopping. I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.